Welcome to the Inclusive Leadership Coaching Podcast. I'm Terri Donohue, your neurospicy inclusion coach. I am an ICF PCC Life and Leadership coach, passionate about social justice and specializing in neurodiversity. My purpose on this journey is to partner with you as you build an inclusive coaching practice that expands your impact. Here on the Inclusive Leadership Coaching Podcast, we believe leadership isn't just about titles or positions of power. It's about behavior, collaboration, and creating real inspiring change. So let's get to it. Hey leaders, I'm back, and this time I'm bringing a guest with me. My friend and colleague, Lisa MacVicar. She is here with us today. Lisa, go ahead and say hello.
Hello, everybody out there in Leaderland.
Oh, this is going to be so much fun. I am so excited to sit here and have this conversation with you today, Lisa. Lisa brings 33 years, across real estate, interior design, workplace strategy, and coaching. She's worked across private, public, and not-for-profit sectors, and was actually Canada's first WELL faculty member back in 2016. She holds certifications in diversity and inclusion, psychological safety and health, psychological health and safety, and change management. And while at Deloitte, she even co-authored influential papers on well-being and ESG. What does ESG stand for, Lisa?
Environmental, social, and governance.
Nice. I am not an acronym person. I'll write an acronym on my whiteboard and say, what the hell was I thinking about? It's that dyslexia. Anyway. So Lisa also partners with leaders, managers, HR professionals, chief of staff, as well as interior designers, architects, and commercial real estate pros, helping them rethink how we all work, how we design and lead in more inclusive and sustainable ways. Lisa, what did I miss? And would you like to share how you identify?
Yeah, well, don't worry about missing anything. 33 years is hard to encapsulate. How do I identify? I'm definitely, in terms of pronouns, her and hers. From an identity point of view, I am an immigrant, first generation settler here to the country known as Canada. And this is the type of viewpoint or perspective I have as I do my work in inclusion.
Very beautiful. Thank you so much. Yes, my Canadian sister. She actually, I think you were like my first Canadian friend.
I think so. You landed here and ta-da, we were put together.
I know. And what we're talking about, audience, is actually the last episode, I briefly mentioned that I was the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director of the International Coaching Federation. And I didn't really go into much detail because I already knew Lisa was going to be here and we would talk more about that. So she was my partner in crime, or I should say in inclusion.
That's right. Inclusion enforcement.
I know. We were co-directors together where we spent so many hours in the trenches embedding inclusion into our chapter. It was quite the ride.
It certainly was, Terry. It was something new for the chapter. They were cutting their teeth with us, so it was quite a wild ride.
Yeah, and it was at the same time that the global DEI was just getting started as well. So we were really trailblazing and also partnering with global.
Correct.
Today is not all about embedding DEI. We are going to talk about education, which is really critical for coaches. So as coaches, continuous learning isn't just a nice to have. It's literally an ethical obligation for us. And we're required to keep learning and growing because the world keeps changing, and so should we. It's not just an obligation. Most coaches actually love learning and evolving. So, staying current with how all people are living, leading, and being in the world has to be a part of what we do and how we operate and function.
Yeah, this is so important because as humans, you can get stuck because you want predictability. You want to say, I've done that, I've been there, it's easy for me, the anxiety goes down. But to recognize that the world is constantly emerging, and those that keep up with what's emerging are actually dealing with reality versus dealing with something that happened in the past or something you're thinking is going to happen in the future. And I think one of the obligation is an interesting word because I think we are obligated as
Mhm.
fellow humans to each other in some way that we are inclusive, but we're also looking out for one another. I think one of the things that we forget about is our obligation to critically think about what the education actually is. Where did it come from? Who started the narrative of that? What are they actually teaching? And are you getting more of the same, meaning an exclusive view versus an inclusive view?
Mm. Yes, I love that. I picked the word obligation because it is a part of the core competencies for the ICF, saying that I don't know if they used the obligation, but it is a part of the ethical practice of coaches to consistently stay informed. And so this is why it's so important for us to have this conversation because there is so many training courses out there, and it's really hard for me, I would say, to find a course that aligns with my values of fairness and the lens of inclusion that I have. Bringing this conversation to the table today was very important because coaches have to critically think about the options and what they are ingesting, and if it's a lot of the same thing, too. I feel like a lot of us can be in bubbles and not examine what it is that we're taking in.
And yeah, this is exactly where the critical thinking comes in, but also the courage to question yourself, and to
Mhm.
question what is being dealt to you. I agree with you. You can buy any course anywhere, any time of the day and night. And really, a lot of them promise transformation, but you want to understand, are you really getting the transformation that you think you're getting? And this comes back to what is the inception of the course? Are they simply selling you a CEU or continuing education unit so you can keep up your credentials so that you can put the letters under your name? Is that the aim? Is that the goal? Is it attending, one big session where, and this is popular, where it's programmed with 20 different CEUs and you get everything at once and it's all about time and getting it done. And I think as coaches, all that might be convenient, but it doesn't mean that it's actually enhancing your coaching practice. It's not actually enhancing the way that you think and the way that you can actually deliver transformation through your coaching. If it's not doing that for you, if your coaching practice is very staid and it's on repeat, rinse and repeat, that's an indication that the information you're taking in is really not transforming you or your practice or your clients.
Yes, and I right now am thinking of an example. Do you have any examples of, I don't know, yeah.
Yeah, so let me be critical for a while, right? I mean, we've been on many sides of this equation, being directors, being credential coaches, being new coaches, all these sorts of things. And just, we are in an unregulated industry. And as much as everybody's trying to have some kind of regulation and competency, simply having competency laid out doesn't, and getting the credential doesn't mean that you're actually a good coach. It means that you did what you had to do to get that credential. So there are many uncredentialed coaches out there that are magnificent, but it's all about what is the system you're operating in. And so if I were to take an example of even myself, and I'm going to be completely open about this, I'm actually questioning whether I want to reconfirm my credential.
Mhm.
And that's an identity crisis for me. It's like,
Yeah.
why do I want this ACC? Why don't I want this ACC? There's conflicting aspects about me because then I kept on chasing, I need to get this done, and I was losing what it was that would actually enhance who I was. So I stepped aside and I looked at it and I said, okay, that's going to happen. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen around this credential. But I really want to start looking at being purposeful about what I'm choosing. And then the more I looked, the more I thought, I'm not seeing what you said before is something that really appeals to me. So it's the kind of thing that, and I'm not saying all of it's crap. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there are lots of things that have value, but there's a certain perspective, if you really want to be an inclusive coach, that comes from having been excluded, that comes from living the experience of what not to do or not what I don't want in order to define what I do want. And so I've put together a lot of things that I thought, I wish somebody taught this to me in a kind way, in an accessible way, in a non-judgmental way, so that I could have room to grow and deal with that discomfort that is always going to come when we talk about inclusion.
Yes. You said a beautiful mouthful there. And I'm thinking about, different identities and how I am a coach that does believe in the credentialing and also is mentor coaching to support people that are on that journey towards, whatever they would call a better or different type of coaching style. And I think that for my journey, it's not really about the credential for me, and it is more about what will, yeah, definitely bring that value to life. So, for instance, I was looking for well, this actually doesn't have anything to do with credentialing, but this is about being a trauma-informed coach. And I was looking for an education program that would support me in that journey. And I met with several people to see about getting, some certification to making it, I guess, legit
Hmm.
Because I guess it's not credential, but it's more certification, right? So making it legit, because being a Black woman, I'm always like on this journey of needing to be taken more seriously or going that route to be taken seriously, to be measured up as equal, if that makes sense.
Totally.
So I thought, I'm going to look into these trauma informed certification and courses, but none of them really upheld the value of historical trauma or structural trauma, societal trauma, and what's actually going on a daily basis, directly or indirectly. And I was actually, when I had mentioned to a couple of the people that were interviewing me, and I was speaking about being a Black woman, dealing with not only my past interpersonal traumas, big T, small T's, all the things, but dealing with the day-to-day experience of being a Black woman, I was actually bypassed, or I guess would it that be like a spiritual bypassing or
Yeah.
acknowledgement? I was told, well, we all have trauma. Everyone has trauma when I
Yeah.
was identifying myself. It was
You
that,
were being
yeah,
minimized. You were being minimized,
yeah.
and gaslit to a certain extent. Um, that's a beautiful mouthful. You just said, let me talk about a little bit of that because being trauma informed is what led me to this questioning of credentialing to begin with. So I spent a year in a course, if any of you are familiar with Gabor Mate, of his Compassionate Inquiry, which is all about being trauma informed. And I would say, to your point, not everybody has got it right just yet around what racial trauma is or what gendered trauma is or anything like that. Everybody's still trying to find their way in that because some people don't even acknowledge it yet. So we're on a very interesting continuum about putting these things together. And maybe someday coaching and trauma informed will be together, but right now it's actually can't coexist in the ICF world.
Mm.
There's a delineation. You're either a counselor, a psychiatrist, a physiotherapist, a psychotherapist. So these are the kinds of things that are delineated, yet our bodies and our mind are not. If I'm experiencing something on a coaching level, it is intimately tied to some kind of big T, small t trauma. It's something I learned in that course was if you didn't have at least one regulated adult in your life growing up, you have some kind of trauma. So to ignore it entirely, and I don't say that lightly, but it means that you have something to process. And the degree to which it affects you in your daily life is the degree to which it needs to be addressed. And so right now, the two worlds of trauma informed and coaching don't actually run beside each other in a way that's complementary. We as coaches have to choose that.
Mm.
And that's one of the things that has made me question credentialing is because the way that I coach now, being trauma informed, doesn't necessarily follow the rules and the competencies. Yet my clients are seeing unbelievable transformation, right? So it's the kind of thing where you really have to walk that path yourself. Understand if you want to take that burden on yourself to begin with. Trauma informed is not a light situation in terms of helping people. This is why there are people that just deal, with psychotherapy and psychiatry. So there is you can't just say that you're trauma informed without having understanding it or living it because that is an entirely different perspective. It's not a theory based situation.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I love that. And I loved how you just said, and I do want to get back to the education part.
No worries.
I tied this back together, but I just really loved what you said about that whole lived experience piece too, because I'm just like, I feel as if I can pick it up, or it's a way of being, especially coaching with neurodivergent clients who are also every day impacted by structural traumas and internalized ableism and compounding layers of their other identities and the marginalization of those identities as well. Yeah, coaching definitely, neurodivergence is hand in hand with trauma informed because it is a traumatic experience that we're having to be consistently excluded or
Yeah.
told that we're not good enough and something's wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is where traditional coaching, and I call it traditional, meaning what you're taught if you're not taught trauma informed or you're not taught inclusivity through the process, is that it assumes that everyone is starting at the same place, that they've had the same background, and that when these things do come up, there's something wrong with your client. There's something wrong, and the simple way out of that is, well, we'll just get you to have a bunch of goals that will get you out of this situation, and and if that doesn't work, it's because you just procrastinate, and because there's too much blaming in that situation,
Mhm.
and I think one of the most harmful things that coaching can do around this when you're not trauma informed is just the simple use of this question that is actually quite powerful in the coaching world, but it can do a lot of harm. And the question is that really true?
Mhm.
We're taught, when I was taught through the program that I went through, we're challenging beliefs and assumptions and all these things that cause us to be hindered in what we want to do. But when you ask someone who has a trauma, is that really true? You are not only destabilizing the fact that you might be minimizing or gaslighting that, you can dig a further hole and cause harm unintendedly as a coach, because to you you might think that you're just challenging an assumption. But what you're actually doing is pressing really hard on a wound of trauma, because now that person is questioning themselves again, which is what is a repeated loop. And it's very difficult for the person to get out of. And as a coach, we were trained to have this very important question. So don't use it unless you're trauma informed, because you need to understand when to use that and how to use that question.
Thank you. Well, that's a tool for the trauma informed or trauma lived experience. And
Yeah.
I immediately went to Byron Katie's The Work. I think that's like one of the top questions. I love doing thought work.
Yeah, there is value to that question.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that coaches shouldn't use it. I think there's a timing aspect of it. And there's first, is the person seeking safety or to be understood? And if you can determine which way that is, because if they're seeking
Mhm.
safety, that question shouldn't be used right away,
Mhm. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because that's where it causes harm.
Mm.
If they're seeking to be understood, this question is very valuable.
Mhm. Thank you for that. Yes. So let's circle back to I'm thinking about maybe asking you about how you, I guess, got into inclusive work and leading it to educational development, because I know
Ah,
that is something that you love and you do so well.
thank you. I do love it. It keeps me going for sure. Um,
Mhm.
I guess I'm naturally curious. And so when you start there, you're always asking, how can I do this better? What do I want to know? What do I think people want to know? What are they telling me? But if I go back into an historical perspective, it's odd that I'm in this position. And this is one of the things that I encourage people to do. When you do follow your curiosity, you somehow get to where you need to be. But my background is in interior design. I did a lot of work in that. I've worked with a lot of companies in the sense of how do they become more efficient? And then I started getting curious about, well, how does the space affect somebody's well-being? And that's what led me first down this road is we can do better. We can do better. And that's when I started to see the systems that harm, even though they're unintentional in their harm.
Mm,
And so I aligned myself. The Well faculty is actually an international group that not only looks at the, fresh air, fresh water, all these things we need, but what do we need for our minds? What do we need for our bodies? What do we need psychologically in a space to help us be well? And when I saw that, I like, the heart starts going, oh, okay, this is where I want to go, right? So I just kept on following that and
mm,
eventually added the diversity, equity, inclusion perspective because I always had that perspective from lived experience. But it's so easy to think that everybody else just might see it that way, but they don't. They
mm,
absolutely don't. And so it's really important to bring those perspectives, especially the ones that are unheard, into it. So as this developed and I became part of faculty, I teach I also instruct at the Rotman School for Inclusion by Design. And so I've started to see a lot of people around these questions that they're asking. And I thought, it's all very academic. It's all very do this, do this, do this, and it'll happen. And that's not how this work gets done. Whether you're a nonprofit or a corporation, really it's about how much money and resource are you putting behind it. But essentially, it's about really adapting and understanding. And if we can't accept and adapt, then we really don't have a way of changing for this inclusion. We just keep falling back into the system that exists. So my forward thrust here now is around how can I not only collaborate, for example, people like you and people who are like-minded about let's build this inclusive educational environment, which means it needs a variety of perspectives, it needs a variety of ways of learning. It needs to be accessible both financially and in the middle of the night, like whatever you need. This is
mm.
part of inclusion, right? But too much of education has become only business in itself. And it hopes that you get out of it what you need to get out of it. It doesn't look at the impact of what you get out of it. And I'm very concerned of working with the impact and then accordingly programming my work. So that's how I'm here.
Words that come to me when you were speaking about the intentionality, how you intentionally pave the way, but starting at impact and working backwards. And how you had also mentioned earlier about how so many programs, the way I took it, in my words, like starting with the assumption of equality, starting at this baseline of dominant culture narratives, we're all equal, and this is the foundation of a lot of the certification programs, a lot of the educational big money making is all pretty much starting there, the same old, the status quo.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to
Yeah.
see the reality of that or the authenticity of that, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's whoever marketed the most that gets the people signed up, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
it's a big name and people trust it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a brand. But remember that the majority of people that have actually lived this experience, that have a lot to say and can teach around this simply by their lived experience aren't the big brands. They aren't, you have to come out and seek these folks because otherwise you're getting more of the same. Now, if they're working with some of these big brands, then you can be at least assured that they are guiding the process or the content or something like that. But you really look deeply at who is writing that narrative because it can be that sort of wolf in sheep's clothing type of thing. You think you're getting high quality wool, you know, but that may not be the case because the actual inception of it, right from intent and to impact, was never more than let's put out another educational piece. right? Because we have the brand or we have this. So by being a little bit more discerning yourself, you are safeguarding what goes in the brain, what goes in the heart. And when you put the right things in there and you associate it with the right folks, and not meaning right and wrong, meaning is it resonating with you? Because you have something in you that says this doesn't feel right or this feels right.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
sometimes you don't want to pay the price, right? But you can help yourself. You can help yourself by asking a few more questions, looking at it, and taking a chance, quite frankly, on those who aren't shouting from the mountaintops how great they are. These folks are busy doing their work. They're busy looking for impact, and I think that's the group that if you start looking for, you're going to find some really beautiful gems in there.
I agree. And it reminds me of this podcast.
I 100% agree, right?
Right? It's like a learning experience from the foundation through my lenses and my experience for coaches and bringing in inclusive coaches that are making social impact in the world to educate in that sense. And I totally lost my train of thought too.
That's okay. I'll add to that. Like
Hmm.
if you're looking at it from an inclusion basis, this should not be something that is just thrown at you, right? There should be room for you as a coach, as a leader, to reflect safely, to understand, to ask questions, to collaborate. There should be aspects of your learning that are allowed to grow, make those mistakes. When you work in inclusive spaces or trying to achieve inclusion as impact, you step in poop every day. It is unavoidable. It is going to be there because it's a discomforting journey that you are trying to, make some peace with. And you can only do it by doing it. So this idea that inclusion is one big happy place, well, maybe that's our destination. But we're actually fooling ourselves if we think that that is human nature. We are humans. We have this variety of, emotions and crap that happens and suffering and all these sorts of things. But as coaches, we're trying to be a positive impact in that journey for people.
Hmm.
We're not fixing people, as you said. We're not doing any of that. We are providing some confidence, some assurance that we sometimes need ourselves. So if there's no room for that in your educational process, then you're basically being dictated to by the dominant narrative. That because the dominant narrative doesn't care. It wants you to behave in a certain way. And any independence of thought is not to be allowed.
Mm,
So,
mm, mm,
right?
mm,
So if
mm.
that's your experience, then it's a clear indication that you can't bring yourself there and you can't have the experience that you need to transform.
Yeah. I practice this discernment. I'm meeting with people, I'm questioning them. I'm just wondering if it's aligned because I can't walk into another room honestly and or be treated like they don't see difference.
Yeah, yeah,
And
and yeah,
yeah.
and I'm quite the opposite. I'm all for normalizing difference. Difference is our natural state.
Hmm.
We don't see a
Yeah.
bunch of clones out here. Lots of people want you to be a clone and drink the Kool-Aid and etc. But that's not our natural state. Our
Hmm.
natural state is to live in the body that we were given, in the space that we were given, with the choices that we have. And there's no, you hear it anecdotally that you are unique. Well, yes, you are. And so is that flower, and so is that leaf, and so is
Yeah.
that, and so we are part of nature. The moment we think that we're something bigger than that, we're part of it, which was what makes it big, but we're not bigger than it. And
Mm.
and I think that's what helps you understand and accept that we're all here in truly equal parts. Right? Just because someone says we're equal in a law doesn't make it so. People have to work at that. And so it's really important that we see the oneness of ourselves and our connection, because that is what allows the inclusion. We can only accept the other if we think we are affected and connected to the other. Otherwise, the other can be over there, it doesn't matter. But if we are intimately connected and we see how we're connected to each other, it's going to be really hard to harm yourself. It's you can, but that doesn't mean you're not going to think more about it, or you're going to think about what that decision is going to help you do. So I think it's important that people are going back to being critical, thinking critically. If you're not allowed to do that, there's something crappy about the situation and the system
Mhm.
that's telling you that, that's broadcasting that to you.
Thank you for that. Yes. So, and that like brings me to what you're doing and what you've created. And I feel as if listeners, you know how we love to give strategies and tools and takeaways just so that you can start implementing some of these very important changes into your life
Mhm,
or ways
mhm.
of being into your life. Like, because I totally feel as if everyone, I think on our conversation prior to this, you were talking about people being so untethered right now and why creating this is just the perfect time for you. Would you like to elaborate
Yeah,
on
yeah,
this?
yeah. Untethered can be helpful or not, but if you've become untethered because you've been disconnected harshly, or something like that, and it wasn't your choice, then that reconnection is necessary. You can always disconnect because for peace of mind and all these sorts of things, but that's a choice, right? So if you know that you need more connection. So what I started was an online school. I've done it on the Thinkific platform, which is a Canadian platform, but can be anywhere in the world if you go to it, and we can provide the link in your
Show
information
notes.
later.
Uh-huh.
But I think what I wanted to I wanted to create what I didn't see yet, and I started with design because design was a process for me where it's to be inclusive. I'm designing a space for a person. I'm designing an experience for a person. So it challenges me to think about what is necessary in that moment. So I decided the first four courses were going to be specifically about inclusion from a design perspective. But I broadened it for design of space, place, policy, and process. So the information in it is very transferable. And my hope for the school is that there'll be professional and personal courses over time. There'll be free and paid courses over time because it needs to be accessible. I just finished walking the Camino for 6 days and then relaxed for another four. I'm going to put a free course on there on how personal development and what I learned through that. And, what are the learning lessons that can be taken from that, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a coach, whether you're a designer. So there's going to be lots in this because it should be the whole self, right? It should be, if you're only seeing one side from someone who's trying to guide you along or teach you, they're only showing you a sliver of what it means to be human and deliver that information. So my next course will be a free course on the Camino walk and what I learned and the pictures and just all the nonsense and shenanigans that I had to face. But it's always a personal journey, and whenever you're challenged, it's a personal journey. So the school itself, to answer you directly, has four courses on it. There's designing for inclusion. There's something called the Well Equity Rating, which talks about how can you embed inclusion in a space or in a corporate space or in a actually any kind of space. There's one about intersectionality, and there's one about what's the big idea, which is just a very general course around inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. So all of these will be expanded on from time to time. I hope to be very prolific and very affordable because I truly think that education is overpriced these days. It's overpriced because you need that little piece of paper. But that doesn't stop people from actually using the certificate that you get to report a CEU or something like that. So I'm trying to help people in many different ways, whether you want just the information or you need to understand whether you're trying to work towards something.
Yes, and took some notes. And I have your design, accessibility, and the trauma-informed part as the foundation. Since you had finished up on the accessibility, meaning the cost point, they are so affordable, coaches, and you don't get that like anywhere, especially for us as coaches. Everything is so overpriced. Everything is just like, it feels like a money grab. It's too much. And then I'm thinking about, oh, the design aspect too. And at first, when I saw you posting about design, I thought, okay, so she's an interior designer
Yeah.
and she's into this design world. What does she mean by design? Is
Well,
it
this
for
is it.
designers? Like, what is a designer to you?
Yeah, yeah. So the design, the reason I initially broadcasted for design, I mean, every marketer will tell you that you need to be very specific so somebody can see it, right? So I went to the world that I know the best, and I thought, how can I help designers create more inclusive spaces? The basic information is absolutely transferable, as I was saying before. But designers, this particular group of designers that I was appealing to, had a deadline for their credentials. And these 4 courses actually contribute to their credentials. So so they could do these in 4 hours and get them done and still get valuable information and then continue to do this at their own pace. By the way, when you get into my school, you have lifetime access and unlimited access to those courses. Because again, it should be inclusive to this. I don't know about you, Terry, but sometimes I read books over and over again and over years apart. And then I think, oh my God, I didn't understand this the first time, but I totally understand it now that I've lived a few years, you know? So I wanted that kind of ability for people to revisit and take these over and over again. I'll also be updating them. I love Canadian statistics because we get so few of them here in our country. For those that are using it for see like actual credentials, they need that information, but it gives you context. It gives you context of what you're working in. So over time, I hope to get better at and include more and more statistics as it makes sense for other parts of the world or for different audiences.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So the designer is the content creator, anyone that wants to create something or learn something. So it's just anyone, really.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Everything you do has some kind of social impact, and you're creating it. You are
Mhm,
designing it every step of the way. Are you conscious of that design, or are you assuming that this is the way that something needs to be done? I mean,
mhm,
everything we're wearing,
mhm,
somebody designed the technology that we're using, somebody designed a course, somebody designed the space that you're in. All of these make a difference to your experience.
mhm.
And as a leadership coach, you, whether you're recognizing it or not, are designing something. You're curating that 1 hour you spend with your client. You are designing the space, the container, by virtue of simply asking those questions and creating that space.
Mhm.
So you can understand if I talk about accessibility in a course, how that might affect the way that you design something, for example. Yeah.
Yes. And then now I'm also thinking about the trauma-informed piece and
Mhm.
having that lens as a designer of these coaching education programs. And how does
Yeah.
that come into play when you were designing yours?
Yeah. So the reason, so there's an unfolding to this process of the school. For example, I have options to create communities and all these sorts of things, right, within the school. I purposely, by design, did not open up a forum just yet because I want to see how people are adapting. So within the course itself, I ask, at the end of it, there's something called extra bits, and if you want to give feedback or if you want to do these sorts of things. So I want to understand what people need in order to have the safety around this type of information. So when the time is right and when people start asking for community, then I can deliver that community. But I have to be very careful about setting up a safe community for folks and an inclusive one. So again, what are we presented with? What is emerging? How can we build this as it is needed versus building something and saying, well, let's just monetize it. I'm not happy with that because that means I'm stuck in time somewhere. It is really about what is presenting. And as you said at the head of this podcast, it is dynamic. Things are always changing. Context is changing. The dominant narrative here in North America is different from the dominant narrative in Africa and in India. And, so it's always contextual, and understanding that and understanding how to allow people to have space in that it's not an easy thing. That's what coaches do. It's not an easy thing. So the more you deeply understand how to curate that space, albeit it's virtual, it becomes that relationship, the better you will be, and not only allowing, but at adapting.
Thank you. The better you would be at allowing and adapting
And adapting.
and
Because
adapting.
if I'm in denial of something or I'm minimizing something, you've given a lot of examples of this. I am taking it and saying it's over there and I don't acknowledge it, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever I have is better than that. The
Mm,
moment I accept it, I don't have to agree with it. And this is what people don't understand about
mm,
acceptance.
mm,
When somebody puts something in front of you, they're just saying this is the way it is
mm-hmm.
for them or for their situation. I don't have to agree with that. I might agree with it, but the moment I accept that it also exists, I'm now dealing with reality. And it allows me to adapt emotionally, spiritually, physically, whatever it is, to that situation or what I'm being presented with. But if I choose to literally take out information that is being delivered to me by ignoring it or denying it, I'm not working with the full deck of cards. I am not actually looking at reality the way it is. So do yourself a service and learn how to accept, even if you don't agree. Allow your brain that expansion, because then you will be able to be adaptable to just about anything.
So pretty much letting go of that perfectionism or belief
100%.
that something should be a certain way. That is just a lot of the cultural norms. That is just the same status quo, same, same, same.
Yeah.
And I love that another accessibility piece to your courses is that it's async.
Yes.
Did you mention that
Yeah,
already? I
so
don't,
yeah, 10 o'clock in your pajamas, middle of the night, whatever you want to do. It is definitely asynchronous. And again, that is to appeal to people's different time zones, to their different responsibilities.
Mhm.
They get to choose. If I'm going to spend 5 minutes here, if I'm going to spend an hour here, it's very empowering to have command over what you choose to absorb.
Your time, right? Too.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And how
yeah.
you do it. And yeah, it can I don't know why I want to say like be a private experience, but
Yeah,
you
but it
don't have to
is.
be in a room of 20 people like me walking into a space
No,
worried about, like is it
yeah,
going to be just the
yeah.
same old, same old? Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't. And this is part of the beauty of designing the school the way it is. I talked about community. The other thing that I'm toying around with is if enough people ask for live sessions, then I will do that. right? I'm going to see what emerges out of it. People might have questions. They might want to wrestle with a question that many other people are wrestling with, right? So I can either add that to the course, or I can, and then if I do, you get a notification if you're already in the course that something new is there. There's a new chapter. Or I can choose to say this is better dealt with one-on-one, or we bring a whole bunch to your podcast and say this is what people were wanting to talk about. Let's talk about it. There's so many different avenues to allow for people's learning, and they don't have to be expensive and rote and confined. Yeah.
Yes, I absolutely love that. We have to talk about this community idea more, whatever unfolds with that. And I kind of want to talk about how we are actually listeners. We are in conversation of creating something together. Maybe some inclusion work around, of course, neurodiversity and neuro inclusion, blah, 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 and other things to bring to the podcast. And also, I forgot, I wanted to mention when it comes to the accessibility, I'm spilling the beans because these courses are only $30. I don't know if my course is going to be $30, so you better grab these. Okay. I'm thinking more like 88. Can I get $88?
Yeah. Oh no,
No, but
and they are $30. Thank you. That doesn't mean all of them will be. And as the school grows, there's definitely this idea of give back. There are some people who can't afford this. I would love to have a mechanism where people can pay it forward or can allow for some community support. So everything adds up, it builds into the process. And yeah, there'll be courses. These are called mini courses. They're an hour. You can
Yeah.
take 3 hours to do them, but they're designed to be done in an hour.
Mhm.
And I will come up with some signature courses, which will be more in depth, which will be probably more than $30. But they
Good.
will, yeah, I'm not
Well,
dictating
for
anybody's
you, I don't
prices.
know.
Yeah. But I
Yeah.
wanted, again, you build a community by making it as accessible as possible. And so people can decide in there what they need to do and how to advocate for themselves. And that's the beauty of the community. I don't have to have my thumbprint on it. People are individuals. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I think about also for ours, and it sounds like you were willing to communicate and partner with anyone that purchases this and jumps into this learning educational experience
Yeah.
and creating it for them with them if they have any great ideas or anything comes up. I'm also thinking about having also the option of adding maybe CCEUs or whatever just to get credit for that learning if possible later
Yeah.
on down the line,
Yeah.
or at least with mine.
Well,
Like if we do that.
credentialing is still part of our society. There
Hmm.
is some value to it, right? I mean, and just do it for the right reasons. Right? Do it for
Hmm.
the right reasons, is I guess is what I'm saying, is that make sure it has value to you, your client, and it's progressing on the journey that you want to have as a coach. Because as soon as anything becomes static, you literally have become stuck somewhere. The water isn't moving. There's no flow. And we all know what happens to stagnating water. So we don't want to be like that in that sense. We can flow. We can make these decisions, and all I'm trying to prove is that it doesn't have to be expensive to get good stuff.
Right, right.
Or
And people put so
overpriced,
much,
right?
they put so much value on the overprice. Oh, okay, so
It
this
must be good.
Peloton bike is $5,000 and this one is only
Yeah,
250. The
yeah,
Peloton or whatever it is must be better.
yeah.
And it's kind
Just
of like,
yeah.
okay.
Ask yourself who started that narrative and to what end, right?
Ooh.
This is what I mean, right? This is what I mean of being critical is sure it's probably a very good bike, right? It's probably very
Yeah,
developed,
yeah. And it's
right?
great. They have a community, I think.
Yeah,
And yeah.
yeah, yeah. So just know what you're buying into, and is it serving you? Is it
Hmm.
serving you? Is it serving your clients? Because we can talk a lot about measuring our effort, meaning how many courses did I take, how many credentials did I get in CEUs. There's a lot of effort of measuring because that's the way the system is set up. But if we actually measure the impact we're having,
Hmm.
it will tell you whether that investment was worth it or not.
Mm,
So
nice.
I'll leave you
Okay.
with that for sure.
Okay. And when you say figuring out what it is, measuring that what you're buying into, and is it serving you? I'm just like, right? Like for me, as a credentialing coach, a PCC credentialed coach and mentor coach, I want to get in and disrupt. So I need to do what I need to do to get
You
in.
do.
And
You
that
do.
has been my motive besides being taken seriously. Like that's always like my look, let me see, and then I'm like, oh, I can get in and disrupt
Yes.
that way. And that is my intention and is to support other coaches in being inclusive coaches and getting in
Yeah.
and change initiation.
Exactly. Know your
So yeah.
path. So, but you know your path, right? You're
Mm,
making the choice.
mm,
Don't do it because somebody says you have to do it. Have that intention around why you're doing it. Because then it makes
mhm,
it clean. It makes the intent clean around why you're doing it. You're not fooling yourself. You're not fooling others. You know the way the game works and you're working it. Like
mhm.
to me, smart, smart,
Yeah,
right? And you have different time. I've gone through that same process.
yeah,
So it's and I may turn around tomorrow and say, yeah, I will reissue my credential, right? I will go
whatever,
for it. Yeah. There's
whatever.
no judgment around that at all.
No
It's
judgment.
figure out your path, figure out what you want to carry, what you want to do, but do it with that critical eye because it's
Yeah,
needed these days. It's needed to see what you're actually navigating.
yeah. And getting your training to understand more, to learn more, and to go from there, because that could be the initiation into walking a new path. Yeah, it
Yeah.
might be helpful, coaches. It might be helpful. Actually, I know it will be. I
Yeah,
know it
don't
will be.
I think the thing I learned the most is just don't be so hard on yourself for having to make these decisions, right? It's you tell yourself, oh my God, I have to have that credential or I don't have to have that credential. And you get into this conflict with yourself. Like you create this conflict,
Mhm.
which is only viable if you allow it to create that. You can be even more creative and say, what do I want here? How do I want to forge this path? And then use the same tools to curate it. So there's a difference of when it is telling you what to do and when you have taken over and said, this is what I want to do with it.
Mm.
That's where you want to be.
And it's hella of exciting. Way
Yeah.
more exciting. It's
You
like,
know the
ooh, you're looking
difference.
forward to something. Yeah.
Yeah, you know in your heart, am I disempowered by this decision or am I empowered by this decision?
Hmm. Well, to wrap this beautiful episode up, leaders, coaches, change makers out there, you don't need to necessarily go to school to keep learning. So if you've gotten a little bit too comfortable in your bubble or you're feeling this nudge to grow, take the leap. Try some new things. Know your path, know your intention and what really matters and what you value. So invest in learning that expands your perspective and challenge the way you think and what you think and know. Opening yourself up to updated also ways of being because that kind of growth, it doesn't just transform your leadership, it transforms the lives of the people that we all serve. Any
Well
wrap
said,
up
my dear.
words?
Well said, my dear. Nice encapsulation. I like to dance around, but nice encapsulation.
Thanks. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm really appreciative. I'm appreciative of people's time who are listening. And I hope this sparks that curiosity within yourself and give yourself permission to explore. The path reveals itself when you explore.
Yeah, that curiosity, lean into
Yeah.
it. And you can follow Lisa on LinkedIn. And she so gracefully and casually promotes her learning, but not with pressure or force and celebrity guests.
Yeah, I look for the hidden gem celebrities, the ones that are just still in the diamond mines that are coming into their brilliance. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
No, 100% that was for you.
I'm practicing more ego as
Why
my
not?
form of resistance.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much for being here, Lisa, and thank you for sharing. And I look forward to whatever we create together. This is not the last time, listeners, that you will be hearing from her, about her, and us. We'll see where this goes and follow her, check her out on LinkedIn, connect with her, and please, if you like anything you've heard here today, if you love anything you've heard on these podcast episodes, past and present, leave a 5-star rating and a
Woohoo!
review. Yes, because you know what that does? It gets the word out to people in your area. Other coaches that might be feeling untethered
Mm,
and want to do something. And what we're saying here today is that educating yourself is the first tool you can have, and it's continuous. It is continuous. It's
yeah.
not Inclusion is a way of being. It's not what shows up when you first sit down in front of your clients. It's who you are. And it starts with educating, unlearning, relearning, and
Yeah.
growing. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Yes. And I'm pretty sure you're speaking to a great bunch of folks who get that, right? They get that. They're listening to this podcast and they are intrigued already. They are curious. So
Yeah.
that like button helps a lot because it's an easy thing to do, but it goes such a long way.
Does. It
Yeah.
does. Mm.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Allyship. Thank you so much. Thanks and bye. Boom! Shakalaka! And that is a wrap on this episode of the Inclusive Leadership Coaching Podcast. If something in today's conversation got you thinking, I would love to hear about it. Connect with me on LinkedIn or at terridonohue.com. And hey, if you're enjoying this podcast or you really want to support me, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review, and stick around. There's plenty more to come. Next time, we'll dive into even more exciting conversations. Until then, keep leading with inclusion in mind.